Graduating from a university in the United States should be an exciting time, but for many international students, it can be a super stressful time, especially if you're looking to stay in the United States and you're struggling to find an employer to sponsor your working visa and perhaps eventually maybe your US green card. Hi, I'm Carrie with International Student Voice, and if you're an international student struggling to find somebody to sponsor your working visa, or perhaps you're wondering if your employer will eventually be able to sponsor your US green card, there may be another option for you. So before I share more, if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just hit the subscribe button and the bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, especially ones related to immigration. So, for international students, you're usually taught this following path when it comes to finding an employer to sponsor your working visa and eventually maybe your US green card. So first you have to find somebody to hire you on OPT, which stands for Optional Practical Training. And we all know that only lasts for so long. So then you hope that employer will then sponsor your H-1B working visa. And depending on what industry you're in, you may have a 50-50 chance of actually receiving that H-1B working visa. So then if you're lucky enough that you are able to get this working visa, that only lasts for about 6 years. So then you're hoping that your employer will sponsor your US green card. So as you can hear in that scenario, there are a lot of what ifs. And I'm not saying it's impossible to follow this method and eventually receiving permanent residency in the United States. There are students who have been able to do it, but it can be super stressful and it can lead to many years of you obsessing over your legal status in the United States. So what if there was another way? What if there was a way that you could sponsor your own green card without having to depend on an employer? So here in a minute, I'm going to switch over to our episode of Let's Meet for Coffee, which is a live show that we have over on our Instagram account. And in this episode, I spoke with Minh Nguyen. He's a former international student from Vietnam who was able to sponsor his own US green card without having to depend on an employer. So you'll learn more about his experience and what it is you need to know about the self-sponsorship method. So again, if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe and hit the bell to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Thank you again so much for being here. I hope you find this episode helpful and I hope you enjoy. Issues. I'm on my data right now. It happens. So I just appreciate everybody hanging in there because you have such an amazing story to share. So first of all, now we're here. Do you have coffee? Because maybe we need another sip of coffee.
Well, I do have my favorite mugs here with water. I'm not really a coffee or tea person, but I do like when I go to conferences.
Yeah.
Like you can get in line to get your coffee or your tea, and then you have an opportunity to strike up a conversation with somebody ahead of you or behind you. You know, I miss those days. We can just fly freely into places. So
me too. Well, I'm so glad that we figured this out. I appreciate everybody's patience. So everyone's been very patient. So let's dive right into this. So if you're just joining, Min's going to share his experience and his story of kind of this self-sponsorship route. So let's just dive right into it. Min, can you start off by sharing a little bit more about yourself? And then maybe when did you first arrive in the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. So just before I want to share my green card process, I just want to say that even before that, it took me 7 years to just come here. So during high school, my mom and dad couldn't afford to send me to a magnet or an elite high school. So I know that it's all up to me to fulfill my dream of traveling the world and, being in the United States. I took TOEFL like 3 times, and until the 3rd time, 7 years later, that full ride scholarship came, and I was able to come to the United States, to the University of Kansas. Okay. And I saw a couple of KU alumni in your audience, so just want to say rock chalk.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's in addition to my 8 years of trying to figure out the green card process. So it's like 15 years in total.
yes, it's a very, very long journey. So, so speaking of your journey, and leading up to you discovering what we're talking about today, which is the national interest waiver. I know first when you and I talked, you explained, first you graduated with your bachelor's and you started working on
Right.
OPT, which is optional practical training.
Mm-hmm.
So can
Right.
and this is, again, what allows students to work in the U.S. after graduating. So can you tell us about your OPT experience? What was that like?
So I did my undergrad and I worked for this global employer down in Houston, Texas. And when I was there, I talked to the HR department and I said, hey, would you like to sponsor my visa or green card for me to work in the United States on a more permanent basis? And what the HR department response was, instead of saying no, they'll say, hey, we have operations or offices all over the world and you're welcome to apply. and so that wasn't very helpful at the most, but I realized later that if they wanted to sponsor me, they would have to go prove to the U.S. government that there would be no qualified U.S. candidates for that job I'm trying to apply for, and that means it can be very difficult for somebody with just a bachelor, like what I had at the moment. And so the first employer was unwilling to sponsor my green card or even an H-1B,
Right.
And I think that would be very typical of many international students' story here.
Mm-hmm.
And so unwillingness, and then I took took matters into my own hand, and I moved on and did my master's in the United States. And upon graduation, I worked for a nonprofit research organization.
Mm-hmm.
And that you would think that would make it easier for the immigration process, because some of you may know that if you work for a nonprofit, let me just put my phone down real quick so that I don't have to hold it.
Yeah, that's fine.
So the problem with that is, even though I know that employer has sponsored somebody else before, right? And when you go work for an employer, you want to make sure that they have a history of sponsoring people. And I know they did even sponsor a green card for somebody who worked there. We thought we had all our ducks in a row up to that point, and then we realized, hey, the grant funding that they were applying for got denied.
Oh.
So they did not have money to keep me on for that role. Mm-hmm. And I realized that even though they're really, I think they're really nice, and if they could sponsor my green card, they definitely would. But in the end, they were unable to do that, and that's something even they have no control over.
Right.
So the first employer was unwilling to, and the second employer was unable to. And there are just so many moving pieces that you have no control over in this process. Mm-hmm. Like you said in the beginning, crossing your fingers that they will sponsor you both for an H-1B visa or a green card. And I'm not good at finding any employer that's even sponsored me for a work visa.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
And you had mentioned a nonprofit, and something students may not know about is a nonprofit. So there's only so many H-1Bs allowed each year, but nonprofits aren't subject to that cap. So
cap, yeah.
So nonprofit could be a university, it could be, an organization. So it was like, yes, okay. It was like, it sounded like you had a little glimmer of hope, but then, mm-hmm. like you said, they weren't able to get the funding. So,
yeah.
Gosh. So
what were their funding?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Min. Go ahead.
So a lot of their money comes from soft funding, which means they have to keep filing for grant money from the federal government or funding agency, and that is another headache to deal with.
Yeah.
So.
And you said that, and I saw somebody comment said that exactly is what has happened to them. So unfortunately, yeah, this is a scenario that many students are facing. So can you just describe what you were feeling at this point? You had one employer and a potential second employer. It's like, so
yeah.
how did that, I mean, where were you going from
Well,
at that point?
Well, I felt stuck, obviously,
Yeah.
but that wasn't the most of my concern because up until that point, I was still in my 20s and I could get started somewhere else.
Yeah.
No big deal. But then the problem was at that time my wife was being with me, was with me, and she's still with me right at this point. But still, she was on an F2 visa, which is a spousal visa that allows you to bring your spouse into the United States, but it doesn't allow, my wife to do practically anything.
Yeah, right.
Helpful with her life. And that is really something that struck me the most because she sacrificed so much for me and she put her career back home on hold just to be with me. And I'm just going to give up and go back home. That's not something I really want to look forward to.
Yeah.
But anyhow, she, even went above and beyond and support me in trying to apply for a PhD or a graduate program at that point. Even though, even if I got in, she would probably be on the same F2 visa for another 4 years or more, and she would still, put her career on hold just so that I can serve in the national interests.
Right, of the U.S. So
Yeah.
So that's a excuse me, a nice transition. So so at this point, you discovered the natural interest waiver, which is what we're going to talk about. So can you explain exactly what does that mean? What is what does it mean in the national interest of the U.S.?
Yeah, there are 3-prong tests on USCIS website, and I'm not gonna go into detail of that. But I think to me the most simple definition would be to do work that has an impact beyond your employer. Like if you create a spreadsheet to optimize an internal process for your employer, the U.S. government doesn't care about that too much because it only affects that particular employer. But if you do, let's say, R&D, research and development, and you publish your work, and that work is on an online journal that people from all over the world, or even just in the United States, they can access this and use that work to advance that field forward. And that would be what USCIS looks for.
Okay.
Obviously, I don't have the latest definition with me, but that is the most simplistic idea I can think of.
Sure. Yeah. So you're doing something that's in some way that's benefiting the United States overall.
Right.
So after you tried your different employers, they didn't work out. You went back to school, right? You started a PhD program. So
I went back to the University of Wyoming, and I started working with Los Alamos National Lab from day one. And this is my green card. Is see if I can. Oh gosh, I keep messing this up. But it's just part of the 17 Department of Energy National Lab, and what they do is they research energy solutions for the country. And as a federal agency, where we have the responsibility to disseminate the information that we find from our research to the public. And that's how I got involved into research and publishing with the Department of Energy. It also implies that my wife could, it allows me a path to a permanent residency before I even apply for my OPT. And that is really what I value, because as soon as I can get that done, my wife can find employment, and she's now starting a new career in, I think, digital marketing, and trying to support her with that.
That's awesome. Yeah. So it seems like, okay, you started your PhD and then you're doing all this great research, these labs under the Department of Energy for the U.S. And then, and that's where you kind of came across this national interest waiver, right? Kind of like what the option.
Yeah.
And so from there, can you walk through, so basically, again, if you're just joining us, this national interest waiver is a way to prove that whatever research that you're doing, that it's for the greater benefit of the United States. So you don't need to have an employer, correct, to follow this path.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit more about the steps that you followed to apply under this national interest waiver?
Can I read from my list? Because I kind of prepare a list and there's so many steps.
Yeah, whatever is best for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me just.
Because we know, as we all know, immigration is very detailed and you have to, make sure that you follow everything.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
We get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Just so many steps.
Yeah, there's so many steps. Here, so. And if you are watching, we are going to list more stuff on our website after this episode is done. So if you don't catch everything right now, don't worry about it. We're going to have more information on our website later. So yes, please.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Yeah, sure. And I think I should have mentioned that the national interest waiver falls into the EB-2 category. And with the EB-2 category, it means that you either need a master's or both, like at least a master's or a PhD, or like 5 consecutive years of experience in that particular field you're applying for. Mm-hmm. And so my number one step was to get that master's, which I did from KU, University of Kansas. And then number 2, I performed research in the national interest with the Department of Energy. Mm-hmm. And then number 3, I reached out to immigration law firms. And I think this is probably one of the most critical steps in the process because you want to know what your options are. Yeah. This is like, for example, I'm not from either China or India because I know I have friends from those countries that are facing backlogs, mm-hmm. and you want to be able to talk to law firms way in advance to see what your options are. Maybe the U.S. is not the right place for you. Maybe if you want to live a less stressful life somewhere else, or maybe you want to plan ahead, whatever your decisions are, they have to be, coming from a team that support you, I guess. And step number 4 is to pick a law firm that you like to work with. This is very important for me because many law firms way back then didn't want to work with me because they still consider me a PhD student. And but I don't want to wait until I get that OPT and then get that postdoc to publish more. I just want to save time. Everybody needs to save time and move forward with their life and not just stuck with immigration the whole time, which unfortunately is the case for me, many others. And the 5th step is to gather important documents like your publication, your citation, all these awards, recommendation letters of proving what you did, and to prove that the immigration is very detail orientation, and also very evidence based. You have to be able to demonstrate that
everything
you did what you did. Yeah. You cannot just say, hey, my work will benefit the country in the future. I've been told that USCIS doesn't like that. You have to be able to show that you did benefit the country in the past. Past accomplishment, not projected future success.
And in your case, it was through your research that you were doing,
right.
And you were able to publish those results. So
right. Number 6 is to reach out to people in your field for recommendation letters, and this is really important, I think, because if you reach out to them, way in advance. Like I told you that I love going to conferences because those places are where I network with people in my field.
Yeah.
And, worse, they'll say no. Better, they'll sign a letter of recommendation, or even the best is to get job referrals from those events. So, it doesn't hurt to network early in a game. And obviously, number 7 is to finalize your petition letter and overall application to submit. Please note that this is just the first form, the I-140 petition, and after that form get approved, you will have to file even more paperwork with the government and pay more money for the government to do a background check on you, make sure you don't have any diseases, and most importantly, to prove that you really are who you say you are.
Sure. Yeah.
With the FBI.
Yeah, right. So yeah, but you know what? Thank you, Minh, so much. I liked how you kind of listed everything. You had like 7 steps, everything that you did. So if you're just joining us, Minh is sharing his experience about how he was able to apply for a U.S. green card through what's called the National Interest Waiver. So, and you had talked about, I want to circle back to, you had mentioned the EB-2 category. And one of the things, and why it's very important, like you said, to talk to an immigration attorney is because when it comes to kind of employment-based, or what in your case, the national interest-based green card, is that there's different categories. So there's your EB-1 category, which is, your PhD, your kind of Albert Einstein kind of category. Then EB-2, which you're talking about. There's also EB-3, and all the other categories. So depending on what category you're in, plus your country of citizenship, it's going to be a little different. So that's why it's really important, like you said, to make sure you consult with an immigration attorney, because they'll be able to best tell you kind of this is what we're thinking might work out for you. So so what I'm hearing you say, Minh, is that you can do you show that you've done research, you're helping, the national interest of the United States, but it doesn't mean you have to be like the absolute best. You don't have to be some like genius, your IQ is off the chart type of person. As long as what you're doing is helping the US, that's correct, right?
Yeah, and it has applications outside of your employer. I think that USC is really looking into that because they want you to show that your work benefits, people all around this country.
Okay,
so
gotcha. Okay, so that's good news, because I know that's also something which it can be kind of confusing when people learn about this. They're thinking, well, I'm not like a genius. I don't have, I'm not doing something that's like record breaking, but this is not what we're talking about here. As long as what you're, like you said, what you're doing is helping, and that it can be applied somewhere.
Just one quick thing. This is very popular in research and science, and I think many people who work in research has this advantage that because they publish their research, right, and that is considered, accessible to everybody, even around the world. And then USCIS look into that and say, hey, this guy's work or this girl's works benefit everybody and not just their employer.
Yeah, exactly. So, and like I said, we're going to share more information on our website after this episode. So we'll list the 7 steps that Minh just shared about doing this national interest waiver, as long as, links to more information about this process. So then you can do follow-up if you're interested in this process. So, Minh, let's talk about time, because it's absolutely critical that international students maintain a legal status while they're here in the U.S. So can you share how long did this whole national interest waiver process take you at the time?
Okay, so working with a law firm took me about 4 months. I would say the longest time would be to gather those recommendation letters, and I just want to share my story as well. Just a little tips on the recommendation letter, because I feel that's That's what it's the most challenging one, because asking strangers to say you're brilliant is not always the easiest things to do. But I think that asking people who have the similar backgrounds than with you would really be helpful, like people who went through the immigration process. They know that the letters are more or less like formality. They are more willing to support you and sign those letters and work with your immigration lawyers on that front. And I've had somebody like that, and they signed that letter in just a couple hours and sent it back to me right away. Versus, I know people are trying to get big names in their field, like directors and senior scientists. Those are great too, great to have on your application. But I've had somebody who I try to send a letter to, and because they're the director of some research center, and they have to send that letter to the security office, and after that I never heard back from them again. And so yeah, because they're signing on behalf of their organization. I don't blame them. I just want to let people know that picking a big name in your field is helpful, but it doesn't mean a requirement.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So sorry, I just kind of sidetracked there.
I'm glad that you shared that. Yep.
Yeah. And so the I-140 petition I sent down to Texas Service Center because I was working in New Mexico back then, and it depends on where you live. You know, the state that you live that has jurisdictions with different service center. So my application went out to Texas, took about 6 months and a half to be approved. And then after that, I filed the I-485 petition, which went to the National Benefits Center and then my local office. That took another 6 months. So in total, a little more than a year to get the green card.
Okay, great. So
yeah,
that's something to consider too, and why it's also important that you consult with your immigration attorney as well, depending on, you know, if you're still on a student status, or maybe if you're on OPT, or if you're on an H-1B visa, you have to make sure that you plan accordingly, that you have enough time for this process. So I'm sorry, I was looking through the comments. Somebody had a good question. Can you do the national interest waiver be completed without a STEM degree or outside? Do you have to do research and publications? And if I understand correctly, you have to be eligible, you have to have an advanced degree. So if it's a master's or a PhD, and you have to be able to demonstrate exceptional ability in the field. So if that's research and publication, it could be something else. And I think that's where it's really, again, it's important to consult with your immigration attorney about what does, you know, what will, you know, immigration consider exceptional ability. So I thought was a good question. So, but it seems like you have to have an advanced degree. So master's or PhD doesn't seem like it needs to be in a STEM field, but you have to be able to show that you are contributing to the United States in some way. So again, make sure you consult with the immigration attorney to determine what would fall under that, showing that you are contributing. So in your case, yes, research and publications for sure is a great way to show that. So
yeah, or 5 years of experience in your field of study. It doesn't have to be a master's. From what I'm told, don't quote me on that, but again, check with the law firm. But I think the most important thing is to be able to show that your work benefits the country as a whole.
Yeah, and you're right. Yes, yeah, you can have a master's or PhD, or I think you can have a bachelor's degree plus 5 years of experience. So you're right about that.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, so somebody I see has another question for you, Minh. So when you went through this process, did you have to go for an interview at USCIS, or was it just all like paperwork, you submitted it, and you just waited to hear back?
Yeah, I did. My wife and I did go down to a local office in Denver, Colorado to go through an in-person interview with USCIS down there, but it was more like, ticking all the boxes, asking me if I was a terrorist.
They do ask
you
them.
plan to practice, terrorism in this country, questions of that nature. And I was really lucky because we did that, and a week later, the whole USCIS shut down for the COVID pandemic. So I've heard interviews have been waived since they have COVID pandemic. I hope that's going to be the case, because if all the evidence is there, there's really not much chance though you get denied.
Yeah.
I mean, they just want to make sure that you are who you really say you are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So somebody just had a good question. Since you are doing research, you proved your exceptional ability with research and citation. So somebody had asked, how many papers and citations did you have at the time when you applied for the national interest in this EB-2 category?
I'm really glad you asked that question, because I only had 3 and 28 citations.
Okay.
No paper reviews. And this kind of ties in with the idea that I want to save time. I could wait until I finish my PhD and publish more, get more citations. But I just think that, hey, why make my wife wait?
Yeah.
More.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in total, so it took you a little bit more than a year to kind of go through this whole process. So let's talk about the big moment here. So do you, I would imagine you remember the day that you got your green card.
Mm-hmm.
So just tell me, like, how did that feel after all of this? Employers not, things didn't work out and you're trying to figure life out. And so how did it feel that day that you got your green card?
Yeah. My feeling was that, well, my wife was probably more excited than I was, because she actually looked good in a government photo ID for the first time. So yeah, she seems to enjoy her green card a lot more than I do. But yeah, but joking aside, my first feeling was, that's it. I worked 15 years for a piece of plastic that looks no different than my DL or my OPT work card.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I just want to tell fellow international students that your life doesn't start until you get your green card or whatever immigration benefit. You have to go out there and enjoy your life. Just because you're on a visa doesn't mean you should not be enjoying your life. And when it comes, it's gonna come, and it's just a piece of plastic. But the important thing to me is to be able to serve. I can tell a little bit of story here. Before I come to the United States, I really wanted to serve in the Navy, because I thought aircraft carriers are really cool.
They are.
I was going to control one of those. But since the military only accept people with at least a green card, and the result was I served the Department of Energy instead of Defense.
There you go. Yeah. Well, you know what? Yeah. And that's what I said. I mean, it can be so stressful, and you end up spending so much time obsessing over your status, which I totally understand, because I mean, it's hard to plan for your future if you're not quite sure where you're going to be and how things are going to work out. So I agree with what you said. It's about enjoying life now, but it's just the life of an international student, I guess. It just depends on what your goals are, and it's a balance. You're always planning, but you have to remember to enjoy today. And because you received your green card, that that also means that your family members. So you mentioned your wife, so I wanted to make sure people knew that too. If you have family, then if you applied and you got your green card, that also means that your family members also receive green cards too. So just wanted to make sure people realize that as well. So, and there's not like some big ceremony or anything with the green card. It comes in the mail, right? It's just like, here you go. You're good now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, your life goes on anyway. So.
Yeah. So now that you're a permanent resident of the United States, congratulations. That's so awesome. I'm so glad that it worked out for you and that you found this path. So, what career plans do you have now?
So this is an interesting question, because like you said, for the longest time, I've been obsessed with, or been so focused on keeping my immigration status. And now I'm going through the process of rediscovering what I am without that legal status. Because my wife and I jokingly say that we've been in that, what we call a golden cage for so long. For example, when you're still in school, you can probably flip burgers, on campus. You cannot do that on campus. But when you're on OPT, you cannot even flip burgers.
Yeah, right.
To support yourself, only thing you can do is to focus on your area of study, that very little, field that you're in, and you kind of really become a specialist in that field. We just kind of jokingly say that we're in a golden cage. And after that, what's next? We're still trying to figure it out. But right now, I think the short-term plan is to finish my third DOE projects and maybe get that PhD, even though I don't have to. But I just want to finish what I started and maybe get that U.S. citizenship.
Sure. Well, that was going to be one of my next questions. So in case you don't know, once you become a permanent resident of the United States, you can, stay a permanent resident forever. You just have to renew your green card every 10 years. So do you plan on applying to be a U.S. citizen, if you don't mind me asking?
Absolutely. Yeah. The soonest I can apply is going to be December 2024. That's the earliest, which is like 3 years from now. And believe it or not, your immigration journey doesn't stop after you get your green card. You can still be deported. Unfortunately, that's a fact. And you can still be rejected for federal jobs. If you go to usajob.gov and apply, they'll only consider U.S. citizens. So I'm not saying that's the only options, but if you do like to work in the federal government, you need to get your citizenship as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And even if you have your permanent residency, it means, that's exactly what it is. You're a permanent resident of the United States, but you're still a citizen of your home country. So depending if you want to travel, I know that's something people still need to keep in mind. So depending on your country's citizenship, you may still have to apply for a visa, even though you're a permanent resident of the United States. So that's also something else to think about. But some people, I mean, I know plenty of people, they're permanent residents and they're happy with that. And others, they can't wait to, take the citizenship oath. So, Minh, there were a couple of other questions. I know we're getting down here. I just had a few more questions myself, but somebody had a couple of questions I wanted to make sure that I asked. So if you could share whatever you're comfortable sharing. Somebody had a good question about budget. So about how much, can you give a rough estimate of how much you should budget for when it comes to this national interest waiver process?
So I think I spend, because it's just not just me, but it's me and my wife. For the second step. The first step is just you, but I think we spend close to 10 grand for this whole process. But half of that is like the attorney fee. I want to make a point here that obviously there are people out there who file it successfully on their own, and they bought the do-it-yourself package online. You could go through it themselves. I mean, you could do that. For me, the most important thing for me is to save time, and for my wife to be able to work, and for me as well. And I was just trying to tell this, but I've interviewed with companies who don't just ask you questions like, you need sponsorship now or in the future. We all know that, right? You only know that they will ask a question in the online application. Now they have a new question that will ask directly whether you are a protected individual. And in the law, protected individuals mean you're either a U.S. citizen or a green card holder for less than 5 years. And even though back then I was still was in the process, and I almost got my green card, I still get denied because I answered no, I'm not So, especially with bigger employers, it's either yes or no, and because they have so many applications, if you're not a green card holder, they won't mind just tossing your application aside. And obviously you could file yourself and spend more time with the application. You'll be writing a lot, reading a lot, and writing a lot, obviously. But for me, the important thing is just save time and applying for jobs without restriction.
Yeah.
And that's why I spent close to $10,000 for this process, which is not cheap. And one things I did was to apply for as many scholarship as I could for when I was still in school, and it helps a lot with the application process. There's things the things you can do to make money being an international student, but that's another story.
Yeah,
I won't get into details here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. It's it's an investment. That's what it truly is. It's an investment. You'll be spending money now, but if it all works out, then oh my gosh, it's well worth the investment. So, and then somebody had also had another question. So you said that you came on a scholarship when you came to the U.S. and I'm assuming that was you were on a J1 visa. So did you have to apply for? Was it on a J1 or no? And
no, I came here on an F1.
Okay.
Just from the University of Kansas.
Gotcha. Okay, because somebody had asked, because if you do come on a J1, there's usually a 2-year rule applied to that, so you have to go back home for 2 years. So, but you can apply for a waiver depending on your situation. Yeah. So, okay, awesome. I wanted to make sure that I had asked that. So we're winding down. We're getting close to an hour, which is, I mean, this has been a wonderful conversation. I thank you so much for walking through your experience. And again, we're going to have all of these details on our website. So if you're watching, you want to go back to review what Minh shared, and we'll also have links to other resources about this process. So coming to a close, Minh, can you just share some general advice? So if someone wants to explore this option of the national interest waiver and getting a green card through this method, what would be some advice you would have for them?
Yeah, work, a lot of work.
Work hard. Don't give up work.
Yeah, don't give up work, but also network early on in the process, because like I said, worst scenario, you get a no, but they could write you letters of recommendation or even better, job referrals.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, networking, we use that word a lot in the United States, how important networking is, but what is it? How do you do it? And it can be kind of intimidating. Even me, like I get intimidated reaching out to people, but what do you have to lose? Like, what's the worst that can happen? They can say no, okay, fine, and then you move on. So I absolutely agree. You just never know where those relationships will take you. So, and my last question, I understand, immigrating to the U.S. can be, it can seem confusing. It can be intimidating. So just based on your experience, your 15-year journey doing this, what general advice do you have for international students if they're looking to immigrate to the U.S.?
Well, number one, and most importantly, is to know why you want to be in this country.
Absolutely.
Right. Answer your why.
Yeah.
And then number two, volunteer your time when you can and reach out and help other people and, learn about what the opportunities this country has to offer, because that will make you feel more connected. I mean, I have people who want to be here but don't enjoy living here, and it can make the process a lot more challenging. But again, talk to people and build a support network to get you up when life gets you down.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to underline that point of how important it is to have a support network, because it can be, you can kind of question your why when you're going through this process and why I'm here. So it's important, take advantage of the opportunities and kind of, remember that. And I'm so glad that you had a support network to help you, your wife, your family, and everybody that you've met while you've been here. So I'm so glad that everything has worked out for you, Minh. it makes my heart happy to see students like you who are able to set a goal and you're able to achieve it. And you are a great example of how, you know, students like you who come and they're able to contribute that make the United States a great country to be in. So I'm so glad that it has worked out for you. And I'm so thankful that you shared your story today. So like I said, we're going to have more information on our website. You can rewatch this episode on our Instagram account. We'll have it on our YouTube channel as well. So, but Minh, thank you so much for being here. So, and I'm glad we got past all the technical issues at the beginning.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you never know what's going to happen when you go live. So, but that's what makes it fun. So, all right. Well,
Yeah.
Minh,
All right.
thank you again so much for being here. And thank you everybody who watched. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We can be in contact with Minh. We'll make sure that we get your questions answered. So with that, that concludes our episode. So thank you again so much, Minh, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.